Howdy remarketing fans and welcome back. Remarketing is all about reaching the right previous website visitor at the right time, in the right place, and with the right message. Your audience is going to be segments or slices of your website visitor population that's pulled from the all visitors list of your website. Data collection tools like Google Analytics, like Kissmetrics, and there are many other ones ranging from free to premium, allow us to start collecting data, collecting that population from which we could then create our slices, our segments, and really be able to hone in our remarketing campaigns so we could accomplish that ideal goal of reaching the right person at the right time, with the right message, and in the right place. As cookie-based advertising really began to take shape, advertisers were able to shift their focus away from which websites they were using to retarget to their audience and focus more on which specific segments of their audience do they want to tailor this message to. It gave marketers a tremendous amount of power and control to be able to show the specific message that they wanted to show to that specific person, a message that was most appealing to that person based on their behavior. And once again, we have that term of OBA, online behavioral advertising. That's essentially what remarketing is. We're looking at their behavior on our site. We're using Google Analytics. We're using whichever analytics provider to compile and to develop that very rich profile of our previous website visitors, understanding their behavior on our site. Which pages did they look at? How long were they on our site? When was the last time they were on our site? Which products or services do they seem to be most interested in? Are they making it to the Contact Us page? So we're getting a really rich profile on the intrinsic characteristics of our customers, and we're also developing a very detailed profile on the extrinsic characteristics of our website visitors, like browser, network, device time, location, time of day, and we're going to talk about the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic characteristics in either the next lecture or the lecture after. But that OBA, online behavioral advertising model, allowed us to start creating really rich profiles on our users, and we could then segment those out. We could say, I want to send this message to only people who have viewed at least five pages on our website, and who have at least viewed, one of those page views were in our shoe category, or it was for this sort of service, whatever it may be. And we're going to look at a lot of different examples in what that looks like in real time inside the analytics account. Creating these segments when you plan and develop your remarketing campaigns is the most important thing that you could possibly do. If you don't get your segments right, meaning you don't have a good understanding of your website visitors, then anything else you do, all the money that you spend on remarketing after that is not going to be as efficient, as well spent as it would have been if you got your audience segments right. Being able to create proper audience segments really just comes down to understanding your visitors. The analytics tools, and throughout this lecture, we're going to be using Google Analytics. Google Analytics is by far the most popular analytics tool, A, because it's free, B, because it's extremely powerful, and C, because it also links in directly with Google AdWords. So that's the tool that we're going to essentially use to collect this data and to create these audience segments. But we're going to look at creating these segments through other analytics providers and the third-party audience tags provided to us by the other remarketing platforms themselves. Like we said, picking the right segments comes down to understanding your visitors. And picking the right segments ultimately comes down to understanding engagement. You want to be able to know, and you need to be able to know, what actions, what information about that visitor tells me how engaged they are, what level of engagement, where they are in the buying funnel, how likely they are to take the next step and convert, how likely they are to find whatever message I want to send them in my remarketing ads an attractive, appealing, engaging message. That all comes down to understanding the dynamics of your customers. It's going to be different for every business, for every sales cycle, for every sales team, different products, different services. You can get very granular, but you need to understand on an overall basis who your customers are and how they interact with your brand. Does coming from a mobile phone to your website show anything different than coming from the desktop to the desktop version of your site? Some businesses, that will make a big difference. Other businesses, it won't make any difference at all. The screen resolution. If my screen resolution is above a certain pixel density versus under a certain pixel density, does that make a difference in the type of customer that person may be? For most businesses, wouldn't make a difference, but I'm sure there are some businesses that will have a real impact on. And we're going to be able to use Google Analytics to look at that information, segment that information out, and get some data and try to pick up on some statistical trends where we want to figure out to be able to start crafting these remarketing audiences. It all comes down to intent signals. Does this action show any intent? Does this action show a level of engagement? Does this action show that they're in this stage of the buying funnel? And when I say action, I don't necessarily mean action, I mean segment characteristic. A segment characteristic could mean average time on site. If this user has an average time on site of 5 minutes or more, does that show, or does that allow me to make a good educated guess that that person is likely to take the conversion action that I want them to take with my remarketing campaigns? If the person viewed a certain number of pages on their last visit, does that allow me to make a pretty good educated guess that they're going to take that specific conversion action? This is all broad, pretty vague, but we're going to get into this in a lot more detail using specific examples from specific websites, specific clients of ours, but I want you to get an overall sense of the importance of looking at your entire population. That's that all visitors list. Being able to realize that concept of segments, we're going to start pulling little chunks, little slices of characteristics, pooling them together to use for certain messages. And how I determine those pools, how I determine who goes into which one of those segments is all based on understanding intent. It's all based on understanding engagement, and it ultimately comes down to how well I know my customers. In the next section, we're going to take a look at a fictitious example to illustrate this idea of segments, to illustrate this idea of getting a little bit more granular and a little bit more sophisticated with our remarketing campaigns. And from there, we're going to jump into a bunch of real live example scenarios on how we should start structuring, building, planning, and developing our strategy using very, very detailed, thoughtful, meaningful segments of our overall website population. Thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you in a couple seconds in the next lecture.